During my first playthrough of Carrion, I was thinking to myself, you know, this feels more like a monster game than what I'd call a reverse horror game. I pictured a reverse horror game as one where we got to fuck with people's minds as he lurked in the shadows, freaking them out like in the Alien movies. Or in the case of The Thing, the John Carpenter movie, which was one of the main inspirations for the game, assimilate a human being and create this sense of distrust. But then I kind of realised something obvious. A lot of the monsters in these kind of movies aren't necessarily trying to freak us out from their perspective. They just want to do their own thing, whether it be survive, eat, reproduce, or get the hell out of there. They don't give a shit about us. I mean, isn't that the whole point of Lovecraftian horror? Which was a major inspiration for The Thing. You still get to have that sense of sneaking about in the vents, messing with people's minds to a certain extent in the game, but we'll talk about that later. This is Carrion. Carrion is a Metroidvania styled, in the words of the developer Phobia Game Studios, as a reverse horror game. We get to traverse the environment as a monster, devouring those in your path to gain mass and abilities. The main focus of the game is basically traversing the levels and eating people up, and the good news is that both of these are bloody, in every sense of the word, satisfying. I was playing on PC using a keyboard and mouse, and movement is achieved by basically pointed holding click. It works really well and is extremely satisfying watching the fantastically animated tentacles of the monster squirm about, sticking to the walls and ceilings as you navigate the levels. You also get what are called prehensile tentacles, which you use to grab objects and people, which, to be honest, isn't very precise or quick. You can't just snap someone up. You have to move into a position where you can move the tentacle, grabbing that someone before someone else shoots you. It unfortunately does give the combat this kind of floaty, unresponsive feeling. However, as mentioned before, once you have managed to grab a person, gobbling them up is sadistically satisfying. Something I've mentioned before now is how the game was inspired by The Thing. The menu screen reminds me of the scene where the dog's face peels off, revealing a horrifying, thing with an extended tongue flailing about, and you can see the inspiration in the design of the monster itself, with its squiggly tentacles and meaty look that does to spaghetti bolognese what the Alien movies did to sex. Even the jittery movement of the tentacles mirrors the frantic physical special effects in the movie. Visually, the stylish pixel art is well done. However, I will say that I would have liked more variation in regards to the environment design for each area, making each section more unique. Whilst there are some slight differences, I personally felt those differences weren't enough, which is exacerbated by the fact that it's a game focused on exploration and doesn't have a map, which can be a pain in the arse sometimes. Your health is displayed at the top of the screen and you refill it by eating those who get in your way. However, at certain points in the game, you may come across containers which will enable you to grow in size, which is important when it comes to the abilities. And these abilities are what Phobia games use to give Carrion the Metroidvania flair, since it's attaining them that lets you access areas you were previously unable to. The developers have labelled their system as a mass-based system, and what this means is that basically certain abilities are only available depending on how large you are, with the sizes being divided up into stages. For example, if your size is at the first stage, then you are too small to use the bash ability, but you are small enough to turn invisible. The next stage, you are large enough to bash, but are too big to turn invisible. As mentioned before, gaining mass is simple enough. You just eat people and it's added to your health bar till you reach the next size level. But what if you want to lose mass? Well, you could lose your mass by getting attacked, but that's pretty inefficient and risky. The best way is to find special pools where you can dump some of your mass, enabling you to access abilities at lower size levels. This results in some interesting but not too difficult puzzle thinking in order to navigate around the different levels, since you will be required to change mass, whether that be more or less at different points. The enemies you encounter can kill you easily if you choose to move moderately slowly around them. However, your speed in Carrion is your greatest weapon, being able to quickly move about, grab enemies and slither to safety. It's this aspect that reminds me of the other main inspiration for Carrion, the Alien vs Predator games from the early 2000s. Well, specifically Alien vs Predator Classic 2000. I never played the second one because it didn't come out on Steam. To divulge a bit, this excellent game where you get to play as 3 different species, the alien, the human and the predator, with 3 very different playstyles, captured its movie influences extremely well, with the predator giving you that sense of being an overpowered hunter hiding in plain sight, ambush those who tread your path, and the colonial marine, which captures the sense of fighting the alien within the darkness of a used tech environment magnificently. Then there's the alien, which is the most notable character here, as the Carrion Douse mentioned how it played the greatest inspiration for the game out there out of all the 3 characters, and it's clear to see how, whilst playing, since you sneak around in tubes, vents and hidden rooms, while swooping in to take out your enemies. It also makes me wonder if it was the reason why the tentacles for the monster are as unresponsive as they are. Did they want to make sure the player moved the whole monster around more to better reflect the alien gameplay? Either way, I still reckon they should have made combat more responsive and upped the enemy difficulty to balance it. The game is not particularly difficult, with enemies ranging from basic every persons with guns to mechs which can devastate you if you're not careful. The swift and sneaky approach can be aided with your roar, which can be used to not only echolocate any nearby caverns but also freak out any nearby enemies to make them step back. Whilst this doesn't give the exact same level of satisfaction as, say, sneaking around scaring the shit out of your enemies like in the Arkham games, which obviously has the advantage of a much greater budget with more voice acting, it still adds to the sense of this being a brooding horror within the vicinity taking out people one by one, which is what I was alluding to with regards to the mindfuckery at the start of this review. The only real reason to stray off the story path is to collect 9 containment units, which are little buffs like fire resistance, grow another tentacle, etc. I didn't feel that they were a particularly great incentive for me to go and explore more, which is particularly important for this kind of game. Thankfully though, the moment-to-moment gameplay in my opinion makes up for this, with moving around as a prolapsed anus being enjoyable, weirdly. And whilst I still wish there was more gameplay that involved messing with people from a psychological perspective, because I'm a sadistic bastard, Carrion definitely captures the spirit of the horror film in its style well enough. I think whether or not you like this game is dependent on whether or not you like the premise. There's no surprises, but it gives a solid and enjoyable enough experience at a runtime that isn't too short, and that doesn't outstay its welcome at around 5 hours. Less if you don't get lost and don't do any exploring, and basically more if you do otherwise. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll give a link to where you can buy Carrion down below in the video description. I've been the Tidy Gamer, and I shall see you next time.